It really helps to have like your best work already inside your head that you can just kind of spew out onto the paper. If you're not capable of memorizing full essays, at least memorize like what they're called like firecracker sentences.
This is episode 2 of A Month's the Uncommon, part 1. Today, I'm super excited to have my friend Nicole with me to share her experiences on how to absolutely ace English. Nicole is someone who I've personally learned a lot from by having these types of conversations together during Year 12. She achieved an amazing score of 45 in English, 46 in English language, and graduated with a 98 plus ATAR. In part 1, we address many of the challenges and frustrations of being an English student aspiring to achieve highly, such as what to do when you get conflicting advice, how to get effective feedback, what goes into developing a highly effective writing style, and many other nuances that will be valuable for you along the way. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So, how have you been?
I've been good.
What are you up to now?
Literally, all I do is study. It's actually really sad.
Do you work still or no?
No, because my boss sold his business because, what's it called? We can't run classes during quarantine, so he sold his business.
That's so sad. Was that the soccer one?
Yeah, the soccer one. So
No.
I'm jobless. I have no job.
So
and then I used to be tutoring my neighbors' kids, but then they said you're not allowed to go to people's houses anymore, so that stopped as well. So like we're incomeless.
Oh no.
I'll start up again soon though.
Yeah, you should tutor, Nicole.
I know.
I was gonna mention this later in the podcast, but anyways. Alright, so I met Nicole. We went to the same high school and we didn't talk too much during Year 12 until like camp, I reckon. Like
camp was at the start of Year 12 though.
Was that at the start?
Yes.
My memory's so bad, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we just kind of did our own thing because I went to John Monash in Year 11, so I missed out on all the fun times during Year 10 with you guys. How was that year for you?
Yeah, it was good. I feel like Year 11 was my most drama-filled year. Never mind. Year 10 was pretty chill. I think everyone was a lot more, not say friendly, but like eager to make friends. And so it was a better environment at the very start.
What subjects did you do in Year 12, just to let the people know?
I did, oh my gosh. I did English language. Then I did methods, art, and oh my gosh, Japanese, and I did biology, yeah.
Guys, and we went to the school called John Monash Science School, emphasis on science, and this girl did 0 science subjects, so...
in Year 12 I did 0 science subjects, but the funny thing is, like, I'm doing my Bachelor of Science now, so we're back in the science stream.
Nice. Back at it again. What made you want to do art, though? Like, was that just something you were interested in?
It was meant to be my easy subject, but I really underestimated how much work art was portfolio-wise. And so, yeah, I should have taken a different subject. If I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't have done art.
Was that, like, your biggest regret?
Yeah, my biggest regret.
One of. But you're so good at drawing, though. And it's part of, like, your little hobby, right?
Yeah, but making a portfolio is such a huge amount of work and like so much dedication, and I just couldn't dedicate enough time like with all my other subjects to make a like good enough portfolio.
Do you reckon it paid off in the end though?
No, I wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, it was good to have those extra study periods because I did art by distance ed. It was like I had I think 3-4 extra study periods a week, which was really good. I would have picked a different subject to do by distance education. I think choosing a portfolio subject was a bit stupid of me. I underestimated it, but that's okay. How
would you think you would have went this year? Like, if you had to do Year 12 during quarantine, how do you think it would have went for you?
Honestly, like, I say this to my mom and she's like, no, you wouldn't. But, like, I think I wouldn't have minded it just because I'm a very big self-study person. Like, I didn't really pay that much attention in class. Like, I was more like if I had questions, I would ask my teacher, but then I'm more of a self-study person. Like, yeah.
I would 100% agree with that, yeah. So I remember, like, during moments, me and this other friend, Anna, like, we would just, like, dip assemblies just to go study at LTV.
Dude, so... I went with you.
Oh, yeah, you went a couple of times.
God damn. Yeah,
God damn.
but that's what I mean. Like, I didn't go to like, I felt like school in a lot of the time. Like, school is for like socializing, at least for me. And so I think my grades would have been better if I was maybe at home because I did a lot of outside tutoring. So it's not like I was learning most of my stuff in class.
So which subjects did you get tutored for, and like how important do you think that was to like your final outcome? Would you think you would have been all right otherwise? Because I think you're a pretty independent learner as well. So
Yeah. I think, well, for English and English language, like I started tutoring for English in year 7 with the same tutor. So I've had the same.
That is early.
Yeah, I had the same tutor for 6 years. He literally raised me. And so, like, a lot of my English ability is definitely credited to him. And like I started learning the English language content, I think in year 9. Like I started early. And so definitely, like, I credit a lot of my knowledge to tutoring. I got tutoring for English language, and Japanese. Only Japanese in my year 12. And then towards the end of year 12, I did a bit of methods tutoring because I was like, I'm going to need that. I would like some of that.
Yeah, so English was definitely your strongest subject out of everything. Was that also, did you also find enjoyment doing that? Or was that just something like you were just good at, but you didn't quite like?
I enjoyed it. Like it's not a subject in which you're kind of gaining more knowledge. It's more of like practicing skills, if that makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah, by the time you reach year 12, you're not really learning anymore. You're just improving like your ability to like, efficiently put like your skills to use. Whereas like if you're doing something like biology, you're still learning like new information.
See,
it's more
guys,
exciting.
Yeah. Spoken like a real high achiever in English, because for me, I had to like learn how to write not language analysis, but like I forgot how to write a text response in year 12, and I remember just like learning the whole format.
Yeah.
You think like why did you start so early with English tutoring? Did that help?
Well, because I started tutoring in year 7 because my mom put me in there, and it wasn't just, I did like English, science and maths tutoring back at like EduKingdom. Plug my tutoring studio, EduKingdom. Nice. But yeah, so I was there for 7 years. I still started early. Oh, not 7 years, 6 years, because my mom put me in it, and then I stopped doing science and maths at tutoring, and I just continued with English because I found a really good English teacher, and so I just stuck with him throughout like the rest of like my high school career, if that makes sense.
Very interesting, because I feel like I don't know many people who got tutoring since like such an early like grade.
Yeah.
Do you think would you have taken the decision to do tutoring again, even if your parents didn't kind of make that decision for you, or they didn't want you to do it?
Definitely.
Not want you to, but like, rather like if they didn't like really sign you up.
Yeah, I'd still do it again. Like I think definitely I had some sort of foundation to go into tutoring, but it definitely like helped me significantly like harness like the ability that I already had. And like, yeah, I don't know how good my English would be without it. Like if that makes sense.
All right, let's jump forward a bit. So year 12, how do you get a raw 50 English without studying? I'm just kidding. you like
I was about to be like, hello.
No, but because I think he had a pretty different approach to what I did, at least, which I didn't get that good of a score in English. But I didn't really go about memorizing many paragraphs. Do you want to kind of talk about that? So I hear that a lot in high achievers. They memorize a lot of essays, and how does that work for you? And do you think it's worth the effort?
Definitely so. Just because of the fact that under pressure, you're not going to be able to produce your best work. And since in English, like your exam, like all the essays, you have to write 3 different pieces, right? And like you're competing against everyone. So you're always going to have kids within the VCE cohort who are going to be memorizing their best work. Because on the spot, you're not going to be able to produce like a grammatically correct sentence, the ones that showcase your best vocabulary, as well as like analyze like key things. Like for example, when you do your text analysis, like you've already picked out the specific symbolism that maybe that's not so obvious that you wouldn't have been able to think on the spot. So I think, memorizing, it's a big effort, but under pressure and under such a time limit, it really helps to have like your best work already inside your head that you can just kind of spew out onto the paper. If you're not capable of memorizing full essays, at least memorize like what they're called like firecracker sentences. They're not like every sentence you write doesn't have to be a firecracker, but it's like you'll have like some sentences that you can think up on the spot, and then you'll have your firecracker sentence, which will like wow your marker. So like it's something that like they'll stop and like maybe reread again, or they'll like give you a little tick next to it, something like that.
That's very interesting. I feel like if I had to do English again, I should have done that. But for me, because the advice we always got from our teachers, so not tutoring, just our normal English teachers, like Mr. Anderson, he always was like, no, don't just rote learn, like memorize paragraphs. And for me, that like both what you and Mr. Anderson said made sense, because one, like, except for the part like where you said, okay, you don't perform your best under pressure, which I think it comes down to personal experience. Because for me, actually, it's kind of weird because, you know, those subjects where like under time pressure you choke, which is like math for me.
Yeah.
But then English was actually kind of like the opposite. Like when I knew the pressure was on, actually, like sentences just flowed for me. I don't know if that's like a personal experience, but
yeah.
So that point, I guess we kind of differ in our experience. But I don't know. Have you always memorized paragraphs? Did you feel like you did worse when you didn't do that?
Well, I wouldn't be able to compare it to not doing it, because I always did memorize everything.
You always did it. Yeah,
just because I would do a lot of drafting, and like for, let's say, our ransom, and we compared ransom and Invictus, I had a Word document that had all these various different paragraphs, because that's the thing, I didn't memorize full essays. Technically, I memorized full paragraphs, and when I planned for my essay at the very start of, you know, the exam, I would pick the 4 paragraphs actually, that best suited the topic, and then I would slightly alter them. So within the Word document, I have like everything that I could possibly want to say about certain things, and that document I had checked over by my tutor, like I had it read over by other teachers, and so I knew it was like the best work that I could possibly produce within the exam.
That does make sense. So I'm kind of painting a more complete picture now. So I think when teachers talk about don't memorize paragraphs, I think they might be referring to just rote learning different paragraphs and failing to adapt that. Whereas the ideal kind of he talked about with me during year 12 was that, okay, you want to have solid ideas and you want to know the text so well, and you have those built up throughout your practice, and you can draw freely from that like quote unquote bank in your mind to suit any topic. And I think that is maybe similar to what you said, but rather your approach is to go beyond that and actually like go ahead and actively memorize those little chunks that you can pull into kind of, it's like building a cake, right? So you can pull out those really good ingredients and build to whatever topic you need. And I think to that point, I think it's just like a misinterpretation thing. Maybe people think memorizing paragraph literally just means, okay, write one essay and then hopefully that's going to be on the exam. Whereas I think your approach definitely, it takes a lot more effort, because I feel like you definitely busted your ass like during your talk, just memorizing English and stuff. You put much more effort into that than I did, I reckon. And
because when it comes to like paragraphs and stuff like that, it doesn't include the topic sentence and the wrap-up sentence, because that needs to apply to the specific prompt. And like within it, you have to be able to alter it, because like that's the thing, you're going to be significantly marked down if your paragraphs don't address your prompt. Like you could memorize the best paragraph that has ever been written, but if it doesn't address your prompt correctly, you don't get the marks, because like an essay is all about answering the prompt, like your topic.
Makes sense. So when you go memorize, how do you avoid that trap? So what kind of content do you avoid memorizing? What sort of things do you think are worth memorizing? Is it about characters or is it about themes? Or what's your approach?
I did a lot about like techniques and stuff like that, that the authors or the directors would use. And then I would, because not many students go into analyzing that. Like it really shows your like intellect as a student if you pick things that not everyone would see. And so like, I would memorize something like, okay, so I'm trying to, English has been such a long time away, but so for example, when we did like All the Light We Cannot See, and like the author Doa, I think I've had this conversation with you before, he uses like dehumanistic language, right? And so I would know that technique, know an example that goes with it, and I would explain why he uses that and how it demonstrates something in the book, you know?
Right. I feel like I definitely did not put enough time into thinking about techniques in year 12. And how do you get these ideas from? Is it from your tutors? Do they kind of pick these things out for you? Or
I think
if you didn't have a tutor, how would you suggest to students who want to achieve at the same level to go about studying?
Yeah, I think definitely annotating your book when you write it, and I mean when you read it, going through and picking out certain things that speak to you, or like, because that's the thing, like tutors are only going to be able to teach you what speaks to them. Like they're going to pick up on like certain sentences or, symbolisms that really speak to them, and they're going to distribute it widely to all of their students, right? But if you go and you read that book by yourself and you highlight a sentence that stands out to you, or like gives you some sort of extra meaning or insight, or you can kind of see what the author's trying to say from even your own personal experience or stuff like that, then you're able to write a really like intricate analysis about it.
So yeah, I think I really clicked with the part when you said personal experience. So I really do believe that your top, especially English, comes down to a test of maturity and experience as well. Because if you don't have that kind of real world knowledge to connect to, or if you don't have a good grasp on just, I guess, human nature in general, or those techniques you brought up. So like, how do you go about just knowing these techniques, like dehumanizing? How does one go build that knowledge base? Because if you just pulled a random year 7 or year 8 and you told them, okay, do you know what dehumanizing is? They probably don't have that general idea, if you know what I mean. So does that come from reading, or does it come from something else?
I think a big part of it for me at least was doing English language, just because like I knew what all the labels were from studying English language. But if someone wasn't equipped with that knowledge, then definitely going and learning online. Like you can type into, like we have the internet, you can type into like Google a few examples of a certain type of technique and find out the name of it.
Okay, so that's assuming you know there is a technique that exists for that. Was there like a resource for you that allowed you to gain these?
I think it just comes down to like probably not basic. Not it's okay if you're reading a text and something stands out to you for some, like whether it's some sort of like poetic device or something like that. Like you're able to pick them out without knowing necessarily what the technique is. Like reading a well-written book compared to a less well-written book, like within the better book, sentences are going to stand out more to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and you're going to wonder why. And like if you look into it, you're going to be able to find the certain techniques. Like you can research and find it. Like there's a lot of, the internet, there's a lot of websites or places in which you can go and find what they mean, or like, and even if you don't specifically pull out the label for that technique, if you analyze that specific sentence, you'll be able to bring out the meaning that you got from it, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right.
So it's about reading with a certain level of engagement and curiosity, not just because when I went through it, I remember just thinking, okay, this is our assigned reading. I just need to get it done by whatever day. And yeah, I guess I didn't really take the time to stop and think about these themes. Because I think it's different for me, because I did read as a hobby, but more on the nonfiction side. But I do come across themes occasionally. Shout out to Sarah J. Maas. Her books are amazing. So, how do you gain that kind of insight and really have that motivation to look into these concepts and what speaks to you, rather than just saying, okay, I just need to get through this. I just need to write a summary, highlight some quotes, and that's it.
I think definitely when you read your text or like watch your movie, you need to think about it from the perspective of the director or the author. Like if your main character does a specific action, you're not thinking about it in a way in which like, what was her name? Mary Law.
Mary Law, yeah.
There we go. It's been so long. So for example, if Mary Law does if Mary Law, she doesn't, or places a book on the table, instead of imagining, like, obviously, when you read for fun, you're imagining Mary Law placed the book on the table. But then if you're reading it from an analysis point of view, you're thinking, why did Doa make Mary Law put the book on the table? What does that signify? Obviously, that's a very basic thing and you'll need the bigger picture. But within scenes, like the difference between, books and movies and real life is that everything within a book or a movie is purposeful. Everything has a meaning. Everything has a purpose, no matter how small. Like you see the work that goes into writing a book or directing a movie, and every little intricate detail means something to a certain level. Obviously, some means more than others. So instead of looking at it like when we read for fun, we try and insert ourselves into the world and just experience it. But when you're analyzing a text or a movie, you want to be looking at it from a perspective of thinking, why? Like, why did they do this? Why did they choose this specific movement, this specific emotion, or like this even camera angle, lighting, anything like that. Like, as much as we clown English for being like, you're reading into it too much, if you want to write a good, like, yeah, a lot, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of English is just bullshitting. A lot of it is, but it's how you write that bullshit and you make it sound like you know what you're saying, and how you explain it is what gets you the marks.
Yeah, I think that's super insightful. What you said about how every detail in a book and movie has a purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really, I think most people, even though you might hear that from your teachers, it's not something that you really internalize. Most of the time you're just glancing through. I definitely didn't notice every detail and think like, okay, what did the author mean behind this? But I guess it's that insight and it's that extra effort you put in that will allow you to really differentiate yourself in terms of analysis and your knowledge of the book.
Yeah.
So
I think a big tip for when reading through a book is to note reoccurring motifs. Like, if you see something come up again and again, take note of it, like highlight it and whatnot. Like, I think just some sort of concept, like for oh my gosh, English is so far away.
I think all the light,
all the light we cannot see.
Like they had this like diamond or something. Yeah.
It was the stone of fire or something.
Stone of fire,
sea of fire. I don't even remember.
Sea of fire.
But that's okay. That is a very you could say it's a recurring motif, but that's like really obvious. Everyone knows that the stone appeared multiple times throughout the book. What I'm saying is look for really small things. Like, I remember reading 1984 and noticing that George Orwell would mention the smell of cabbages a few times throughout the book, and I would just take that note. I don't think I even ended up analyzing it, but something as small as that, whereas for All the Light We Cannot See, he mentions knots a lot, knots and ropes, and so I took note of that and I made it into
knots and ropes.
Yeah, I know that sounds...
I've never noticed that.
But yeah, so you just take note of these very small things and you're able to use them as like motifs and symbols to further explain your ideas that you want within your essay.
Do you almost feel like when you're writing text responses that you're actually creating something from like entirely creative by yourself, and you're just drawing evidence from the book to back up your own point? Is that kind of, I guess, because I felt like that sometimes, and I think it's almost near the edge of going off topic, but at the same time, I think that's where the creativity really flows. So, for example, if you want to make a point and it seems like an extrapolation and a bit of a jump in logic, but you have enough evidence to back that up, do you think that will be ideal? Because even though it's not quite 100% what the author intended, like, but still, if you try to make that point, I think it will help you stand out. Is that a risk that you took?
Like, definitely, because at the end of the day, it always comes down to your interpretation of it. Obviously, don't make a huge, wild interpretation, but if you have the evidence to back it up, then go for it. Like, if it makes sense, like, obviously, if it makes sense, then, and you have the evidence behind it, go for it, because it will really show a different level of like, not necessarily maturity, but like a different level of insight that you took into looking as you analyzed. Because
it's your interpretation, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, if everyone's is the same, then you don't really, there's not much point. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because a lot of people make the mistake when writing a text response. It's text response, isn't it?
Yeah, text response.
When writing a text response, people just start summarizing the plot. They talk about like what happened, I'm going to keep using All the Light We Cannot See, like what Werner, I can't say his name, Werner Mary Law did. It's not so much about what they did. Like, you need to, a lot of people, a high scoring essay will be one that analyzes what the author, Doa did and how he told the story. Like, obviously not every sentence you should have him, but like at least mention him a minimum of once in each paragraph. A lot of people skim past that, and that way, like, if you don't mention the author, you're going to find it very hard to analyze the intentions in which the book were written. and the meanings
Yeah.
behind it, because you're gonna be storytelling. You're saying like, oh, the main character did this and then he did this, and then all of a sudden, like, you're not analyzing the thoughts and key messages behind, like, the prompt is asking you to explore certain themes, and like, while events in the books have those themes in them, it's not exploring those themes if you just say like, okay, so if the prompt is something about sadness and you say, oh, this sad event happened, it doesn't really answer the prompt's question, because you're not exploring the theme or the idea of sadness and how it was portrayed, and how it was, how it was portrayed to the audience and explored, and like what messages that Doa wanted the audience to pick up on,
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of English teachers try so hard to get the point across by using all those different techniques. Like, God, I can't remember the name, but essentially it's like a little technique for you to not tell the story as like a ongoing event, but rather like a recount, and always mentioning the author's name, of course. But at the end of the day, all these small tactics lead you back to the strategy of having your own, I guess, interpretation, instead of just following the storyline and recounting different stories to, I guess, support some obvious point. Yeah. I don't think that's an easy concept for students to grasp, and I think it does just come with repetition and practice, as well as like a good tutor or teacher. Yeah.
Because I don't think it's taught well. Like, I think, not to diss anyone, but I just don't think it's taught well in schools. Like, a lot of these things, like English is very easy to do, like, to pass in, like, you're not, like, to fail in English, it's pretty hard. No shade to anyone. Whereas, like that's the thing, if you put in effort, you're never going to fail English. Whereas to do well in it, like, there are certain techniques and like strategies and just knowledge that you need to learn that isn't really taught. Like, I did not get my English skills within the classroom. Like, I got it at tutoring and from doing a lot of writing myself. Like, yeah.
I think English is one of those subjects where it's super hard to figure out your own way. Because for me, I had a greater degree of success in areas of science and math, where it didn't take as much self-reflection and, I guess, just knowledge, because you always have that. In English, you're kind of just lost and you don't really have that clear compass, because your teacher is the only source of feedback. Oh, not only, but they're the only good source of feedback, I guess. Whereas in math, you can always just check, okay, you can get immediate feedback. So I found English to always be quite tricky in that respect.
Yeah.
So knowing what you know now, what advice do you have for people who don't kind of have that extra guidance? So maybe they don't have a tutor, or they're not as active with their teachers. How do you think they should go about improving their own work? And do you think it's even like viable at all? Or do you think you should definitely go find an expert and get their opinion?
Well, I don't think you need a tutor, but I do think you should be active with your tutors, whether, like, that doesn't have to necessarily be in class, but like handing them work to correct, like perfecting your own work. And you should start early. Like, you should start at the very start of the year and not like a month before the exams, because it takes a long time to build up that inventory, like, as we were talking about before, to have those, like, because I did it for both English and English language. The same techniques I applied to both of them when it came to writing essays. And I had to start very early on in order to be able to, like, shove that much knowledge inside my little head. Because at the end of the day, if you start preparing right before your exam, even 30 days before your exam, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage from people who started early on in the year. And as much as people are not, like, really in that headspace, there are going to be people in the VCE cohort that are. This is only if you want to get, like, really high. But, like, yeah, I just think... Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting, because I read something the other day. It was, I think, this book called 365 Days Discipline. But anyways, it's so random, because like all these ideas connect and they're not really from like a similar place. But anyways, it was like people tend to underestimate and overestimate things in the future. Oh no, this is actually from my economics lecture, which is weird.
Keep going.
But anyways,
it's interesting.
So people tend to underestimate the amount of stress they will face in the future if they procrastinate, and they tend to overestimate their ability to cram at the end. So I think that's definitely because English you can't really cram for. I feel like it's not even like science or math where you just need to get the content down, because as you said, it's like a skill that you need to practice and hone throughout the year. And so I had a really good. I think Mr. Anderson gave me a really good point where he was like, "You don't even need to send me complete essays. Just literally email me little paragraphs to correct." And I thought that was
100%.
really insightful as well, because he saw that, okay, people have this mental barrier of like writing full essays and feeling like you need to complete a project to hand in. But whereas you can still hone your skills through these little segments. And at the end of the day, it's the paragraphs, as you said, that's gonna be the building blocks. So not necessarily you don't need entire essays. So
you don't even need full paragraphs to begin with. Like, I started working on my like firecracker sheet at the start of the year. Like, as I was reading the book and I was picking up like different motifs, symbols that I wanted to use as part of my inventory, I would write a sentence, quote one sentence quoting it, one sentence explaining it, and I would go and send it off and see if that was like worthy of being in my firecracker list. Like, you can write a whole freaking Word document of just random sentences. None of them even have to connect with each other, but just explaining very short ideas which you would fit in to your essay somewhere in your paragraphs, and get them checked off and see and work on improving your skills that way, because it can be daunting, even full paragraphs, let alone an essay. And so just keep on working on, and as you write these sentences, you're going to improve your vocabulary, you're going to improve your knowledge of like techniques and whatnot. Yeah.
what do you think about the challenge people have with conflicting opinions and feedbacks? Especially you have a tutor. I think you might have mentioned this a couple of times in year 12. So how did you deal with that? Especially if you had a tutor who, I guess, you trusted more than your teachers?
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. The whole VCE English thing, like, English is very much down to interpretation. However, for VCE English, it's not, because there's a syllabus for it. And all of the subjects have syllabuses. As much as they say English is down to interpretation, it is to an extent, but it's the same way that they would mark a biology exam is the same way that they're kind of going to mark an English exam. So you have certain conventions and whatnot that you need to follow within your essays. And if you're not 100% sure, if you're not 100%, I was going to try to say certain and sure. Okay. So if you're not 100% certain that your teacher is getting it right, or if you have two teachers with conflicting opinions, check the syllabus. It's there. It's active. Like, for every single subject that you do, you should check the syllabus, because at the end of the day, your teachers who are teaching you are not marking your exams. And no matter if your teacher, as much as you trust them, has a conflicting opinion that conflicts with the syllabus, don't follow your teacher's advice. Follow their advice for your stacks if they're the ones marking it. But as soon as you get to the exams, and if their advice conflicts with the syllabus, throw out all of it. I'm not even kidding.
So, okay, first of all, I don't even have any memory of there being a syllabus in English. I think that's just how...
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, does the syllabus really detail the marking rubric, I guess? Or like... Because at the end of the day, I guess the interpretation I'm talking about is not really like where people just make the excuse of like, oh, English is impossible because it's all opinion. Like, no, there's an objective standard for good essays, of course. Yeah. But at the same time, when you're really trying to fine tune that last bit, when you're in the last stretch of your year 12 time, and you're really trying to perfect your style or the types of language you use or certain things to avoid or things like that. So I remember, for example, Mr. Anderson was like, okay, don't use this really fancy word in this I can't remember what it was, but yeah, because it makes you sound overly whatever, right? So it's these like really minute details. So one, do you think they actually matter at all? And two, if they do, then, because I don't think these are the things that the syllabus can really reflect, because it really does come down to a lot of personal preference. Okay, one teacher might find this language to be really attractive, while other may think, okay, then you're just, showing off or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But, what's your advice on that?
Well, that's the reason why your essays are not marked just by one person. Like, they'll be cross-marked. So you don't really have to worry about, like, differencing minute opinions. What I meant when I explained that before is, like, for, what's the one? Argumentative analysis. Like, if you check the syllabus... I didn't check 2020, we went in 2019. 2019. for example, for language argumentative analysis, they every year always tell teachers not to teach their students to list techniques, to make techniques, right?
Yep.
That in a whole is already taught badly, but that's what I meant about conflicting opinions of something like that. When it comes to minute details like that, you don't really have to worry that much just because of cross-checking. But at the same time, when it comes to vocabulary, make sure the words that you're using, like whether, like even if they're fancy, just make sure you're using them correctly. So a lot of people will, consult the thesaurus, .com and find fancy synonyms for the words that they would rather use because they think it makes them seem smart. But some words are not interchangeable. Like you need to make sure you know how to use the word. Like for example, I think I've seen a lot of students like use the word depict and like not use it correctly. Like you always have to depict something as, and a lot of kids don't even get that because it's not taught like that.
I literally don't get that.
Yeah.
I'm one of those kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's something like an author needs to depict something as, like the as, and same with portray, like portray as, like just small details like that will really show whether or not you know how to use that word. If you have, a little bit of, lack of confidence when it comes to using a word in the exam, before the exam, go learn and consult your English teachers and whatnot to find out how to properly apply the word. But in the exam, if you're not quite sure how to use this, firecracker word, it's better to leave it because it'll show kind of that you just consulted thesaurus.com.
Yeah, and I think people tend to get stuck on these like the micro aspects rather than focusing on their macro problems. So things with word choice, even though it's one of the not challenges, but I guess like just small pitfalls I faced. So personally, like I've had problems with like trying to, not intentionally, but just being stuck on different word choices because you might think there's a better alternative in your brain and maybe you can't get it in the moment and you end up being stuck for a little bit, and that's really slowed me down. And I've handed in essays where my teacher was like, okay, this is just too convoluted. Just like make the language simpler. So how do you strike a balance between being clear and concise versus, which I know is king, versus being sophisticated?
So what you want to do when it comes to your verb words are so important when it comes you're doing words, when it comes to your essays. But it can be hard to grab the right one at the right time. So what you need to do is make a Word document and then go through and write like synonym words for specific things. Like, okay, so let's say the author is implying, because that's the thing. Once you have one word down, like you have to shy away from using it again and again and again. Because if you're saying the author suggests every single sentence, your marker is going to be like, well, what? Like it's gonna, that's the thing. If you learn how to use one word correctly but that's the only word you use, that's going to deduct marks from you. So like make a sheet and like, okay, so the action of like the author, hinting at something. So you have like words like implying, suggesting, all that stuff. So you make the synonym list for that. If he's emphasizing something, you have emphasizing, highlighting, underlining. You think of these synonyms so that when you're in your head, because sometimes when you're writing, you'll think, oh, he emphasizes it. But then you look and you said, I already used the word emphasize in the sentence before. So I can't use emphasize and then use emphasize again. So, well, then he highlights it in this sentence. Mm-hmm. So if you have a big enough, it doesn't even have to be that big. Like as long as you get enough words within your little sheet and like go through it and for all the different verbs, find like four or three synonyms for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I personally did that, which I like forgotten already, but it's just something you realize is super useful to do because at the end, did you ever feel like English became almost like a formula for you to fill in? Because towards the end, once you develop that style, once you develop that structure, because text response is really structured. So in the end, I found myself really just filling in those gaps, like just putting in my ideas and knowing which words to fit around it. And it's all about just changing those different words up sometimes.
Yeah.
Was that also your approach, or do you think it's ever good to have a kind of rigid formula gap filling approach to English? Because I guess people tend to think it's a more creative, and maybe the top high-enders tend to take more risks with these things. What's your suggestion on that?
I definitely think it's a bit of both. Like I took a very scientific approach to the way that I did English. Like it was, I had these basic formulas in my head, especially when it came to argumentative analysis. Like you just go through, you pick, like, because that's the thing, you're not meant to list techniques, you're meant to explain them. So you pick a technique and then you explain them and then you show how it affects, actually argumentative analysis is very formula based, but you need to switch it up. You can't just do like author, effect, verb, like reader, influence. Like you need to switch it up, and like that's where some people get tripped up. Like yes, it is formula based, but you need to be able to alter that formula so your essay doesn't sound robotic. And you do this with things like adverbials or stuff like that, or like you have relative, like you change your sentence structure. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's...
Yeah.
I feel like I'm really dumb when I do this, but I literally just switch like the effect on the audience to the start of the sentence and then explain the effect to make...
Well, you can do that as well. And it's about variation with your sentences, like your sentence structure, your sentence length. Throw in a semicolon every now and then. Learn how to use semicolons correctly, please.
Yeah, can you explain how to use that? I'm like first year uni, I don't know how to use semicolons.
Okay, so semicolons are practically kind of like a full stop. They need to have two complete sentences on either side, but your second sentence needs to relate somewhat to the first sentence.
Right. Okay. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's like a full stop. That's the thing. So you treat it like a full stop. So if you have two sentences and you put the full stop in the middle of them, and your second sentence, if it's not a complete sentence with a subject, with a subject object type of thing, then that's not how you do it.
I feel really dumb.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. What did you think about collaborating with people during English? Did you think that was a big part for you? Because I know you had a tutor, but would you suggest collaborating with your peers if you didn't?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I think a lot of people within VCE treat it too much like a competition, and they don't want to share the specific ideas that they get. But like at the end of the day, the better that your cohort does, the better that you will do. And it just creates like a less toxic environment. Like I remember before exams, I think one lunch, me and Anna sat down and we sat down and I explained to her, and she took notes, and I explained to her all the different themes and how they had specific motifs. Like I gave her like my whole list, because at the end of the day, like I think people take it too seriously. Like they see other people's success as kind of their downfall, and I think it's just a very toxic mentality. So yeah, like sharing your ideas, like helping others is not something to be shied away from, because just when you help others, you help yourself, because they're going to exchange the information that they have. And at the end of the day, like your essays are going to be different. Like you're not writing your essays together. Whether or not you explore the same ideas, well, so is like not a million people in the state, but you get what I mean. Like,
yeah, I 100% resonate with that point, because I always say like I saw it as a competition, but not in the sense that, okay, I had to beat other people down, but rather it was just a way for me to motivate myself.
Oh yeah, no,
but I agree with
I'm
what you
competitive.
said. Yeah, for sure, we all are. And yeah, I think it's just really short-sighted when this is going a bit away from English, but still interesting point. So yeah, like when you help other people, it's not, because when you look beyond VCE, if you build these relationships, they're going to serve you way longer than what you're going to supposedly gain, which isn't even real most of the time, from, holding on to your own ideas. And yeah, I think being just so closed off and like short-sighted, because once you build those kind of relationships, you don't know what sort of opportunities they can bring. Like, yeah, it's just, I can't think of a good example right now, but yeah, I think it's easy to fall into that trap when you're a bit younger and a bit more dumb but competitive. Like you tend to have that more toxic mindset, for sure. I know I had a little bit of reservations with holding on to my own ideas, because I thought, English, it's all about originality. But I think, definitely if I were to go back, I think that was definitely a dumb choice. Not that I like did it too much, but it was just also a thought there. So I think it's important for people to understand, like, it's not really, you're not trying to beat down your cohort, but rather you can stand out. But in terms of English, I think it's definitely beneficial for yourself, for you to act in a way where you bounce your ideas off of other people. And because with English, it's not like math where like you're not going to get better by talking to other people about calculus. Like you just got to go practice, right? But English, like I think it's just like having a conversation, talking about these themes, and you generate so many new ideas that you never came up with. And yeah, I think it's definitely mutually beneficial. So
yeah, no, 100%. This is a little bit off topic, but yeah, the whole principle of like, so I think I've mentioned to you before that I did Montessori schooling in my primary school, right?
what schooling?
Montessori. So it's a type of schooling in which there's 3-year levels per class, and like it's based on the idea that the older kids will teach the younger kids, if that makes sense. So as you go through it, so like as I went throughout my schooling, like I'd learn something and then I teach it to someone else. And even when I got to high school, like I very much, when it came to English and English language, at least, not maths, oh my God, I would teach other people. And the whole concept is when you learn from others, when you learn from someone, you're learning. But at the same time, like people tend to forget that when you teach others, you're consolidating your learning. And that's a really important step that high school just doesn't provide.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
Yeah.
School doesn't,
Yeah, this is super prevalent, especially in elite athletes as well, surprisingly. They have this system, I think it's in a lot of sports, but I think recently I saw it in jiu-jitsu where they had this training approach. It's pretty much 3 layers. You compete with someone, you train with people who are better than you to push you. You train with people who are the same level so you can really practice. And also you train with people who are worse than you so you can actually teach them. And that's the quickest way to mastery, which I think is super important, and definitely high school lacks that aspect, and I don't know how you can actually build that. Maybe because year 12 isn't a really good time for you to spare your time into tutoring other people, and I'm not sure, because I guess obviously it's beneficial. I guess you can teach your friends. Like if your friends struggle with a concept, it's definitely like, okay,
that's what I mean. You're not in year 12, you're not going to go out of your way to like everything you're learning, I need to teach someone, like someone please sit down and let me teach you. But definitely building that skill when you're younger is probably really important. And like, as you explained in jiu-jitsu, having those 3 different levels, it's like the same principle of why there are 3 different levels within those classrooms. And
very interesting. This is not even English anymore, but like
it's
so
life,
much
bro. It's life,
bro. Yeah. So what was like your approach generally to studying? What was your mindset like? Did you try to have a life and school balance during year 12, or before that? Was it different?
So the way that I balanced it, I don't necessarily know if it was healthy, but I studied like every chance that I got. And so that when a social event came up, like a party or something like that, I wouldn't feel guilty going, because I get guilt when I don't study. And so I would, honestly, I don't think what I did was necessarily the healthiest approach. But it is what I did in the end. I would study as much as I could. Practically like I think if I went through a basic day of year 12, it was like get to school, go through classes, and then I'd have tutoring after school, and then after that I would go like to Gloria James, and then I would study till closing, and then I would go home. So probably not the healthiest, but at the same time, I think VCE is very much about playing a game, if that makes sense.
Okay, so when you first mentioned that you studied at every opportunity you got, I was kind of picturing like, on the bus, pull out your phone, read some text. Like standing in the canteen line, pull out your phone, read some text.
No.
So definitely, it's not that. It's just it's just about having more of those like longer sessions where instead of resting or doing something else, you just chose to leave more time for study. It's
trying to like use your time wisely, if that makes sense. Like reading on the bus and whatnot, I'm gonna get car sick. Like I wouldn't. It wouldn't be a productive way of studying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, no, because
not talking to friends. Not talking to friends at lunch wouldn't be a productive way of studying. Because like, if you're trying to study in an environment in which everyone's having fun around, you're not going to do it productively. That's why I didn't miss parties. Like I still went out, and if there was an event, like I would go to that. Because if I turned down the offer and I was at home, I wouldn't be productive, because I'd be thinking like, fear of missing out. Like I'd be thinking about it subconsciously, and my brain wouldn't be as like, what's it called? Like dedicated to the task that I'm on, because I would be thinking about something else. Whereas if I took, so let's say like you're at this party for, I don't know, three hours, let's say. Those 3 hours, if you didn't go, wouldn't be that productive. Whereas if you took those 3 hours and you put it in like after school, like no one really wants to study after school. Like you're tired as hell. But if you do those 3 hours after school and then a party comes, you don't feel guilty about going to that party, and like you get the most out of those 3 hours, if that makes sense, because of how you planned it. Yeah,
so it's just a work hard, play hard mindset instead of
work hard, play hard mindset.
Procrastinating but still playing but feeling guilty. No, that makes sense.
Definitely.
Even though it didn't quite that wasn't quite because I wasn't as drawn to parties as maybe I'm a bit introverted in that aspect, but whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, okay, in terms of studying environment, because you always promoted Gloria James, which was hilarious. So it's like what's the environment like? Like, because I know it's a bit counterintuitive, like at least to me it's a bit counterintuitive, because I think I study better in a more quiet place. And only when I get super tired, I want to like take a walk around and get some just energy, like being alive from being like around other people. So did you find that aspect around cafes?
I don't think Gloria James is the best place to work just because of the noise level. Like, it is quite loud. But the whole principle of why I went to Gloria James is because I needed a place outside of home. Like, because at home, like, you have distractions. Like, I want to take a nap. Like, I'm gonna look on my phone. Like, and also, like, if you go and study in a public place, people will hold you accountable. Not necessarily people that you even know. No one's going to ever approach you, but you have this sense, like, it is not socially acceptable for me to nap at this table. Like, it's like removing the temptations. And that was like the main reason why I would always study outside of home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, but if you were given a choice between a library and Gloria James, which one would you have picked? Because no, I'm not trying to say like you're weird, because I do see that a lot in people. So I'm just curious, like, why are people drawn to cafes?
I think it's the atmosphere. Like, sometimes the library can get a bit depressing. I think it's the atmosphere in which I was drawn to. Like, I was able to have a few breaks because, like, I went to the Gloria James near my old high school, and so, like, people that I knew would walk through, and, like, that is a distraction, but sometimes it's healthy to get your mind off things and talk with people. So I think that's why I was drawn to it. Also, I think library lighting, like, can make you feel really lit. Like, some library lighting, you know what I mean? It's that, like, it's like processed LED lighting. It's not warm.
Because like, it doesn't have windows. Like, sometimes you just sit there and just like, I don't even know what time of the day it is. That kind of feeling. I
think in Gloria James I had the sense of passing time, and I think that. But obviously, I think. I don't know where I would study once Corona opens up. I think honestly, libraries are fine. I don't know why I picked Gloria James.
I think even at library, because I went on campus the other day actually to study at Monash, because their library is actually open. And I realized I was so much more. I was focused in the sense that I was in an environment where it was time to study. That's what everyone else was doing, and that relates back to what you said, because environment is everything. And there's this really like there's a lot of views on this video on YouTube where just the professor talking like 50 minutes about like how to study, and one of the points he brought up was like have an environment where you actually study, and he talked about having like this lamp that you turn on only for studying, which I thought was pretty funny, because you only have like your little dorm space. But and what I was going to say was that, because I went the other day and I felt like that level of social consciousness was a bit new to me, because I have been home for a while. I didn't feel that as much when I went to the library every day, but I would imagine like in a cafe, because you see a lot of movement. And in library, what I realized is that when people walk by, when you don't, I think it's just like a natural reaction to movement, just like a protective instinct, where you just like kind of glance at them to make sure everything's okay. Like, was that distracting to you in the cafe, or did you just kind of get used to it?
I think obviously it was distracting. I'm trying to read. I think. But the thing about Gloria James is that everyone studies within this cafe. Like, this cafe is like, it's not like people are going there to eat. The customer base of this specific Gloria James, since it's right next to a high school, is like everyone in there is studying.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and like people come to this cafe by themselves and sit down and study. It's that type of environment. But definitely, I think that it was definitely distracting. It was, and it was not the most productive environment. Especially movement and whatnot.
Yeah, especially I found that at school, because you always, I think high school is just the time of like where your self-consciousness just is a bit high as well. And do you think it helps being around people? I don't know why I'm like so curious, and this is just like study at a library or cafe, but it's just like, do you think studying around people who know you versus people who don't know you, which one do you think is less, I guess, makes you feel less self-conscious? Because I realized at school, I always had a certain degree of distractedness where I was like, okay, how do I appear to the public, or like how do I appear to the people around me? And that sense of like, and that just takes away from my focus, because when I'm at home, you're like completely relaxed, you know, and you're focused not only on what you're doing, but obviously there's more distractions. So yeah, was that ever a thing for you? Or
I definitely think I would prefer studying with strangers. I get I get too distracted with friends and whatnot, and I have very little self-control. Like I was going to say earlier, like I can't really comment on distractibility just because fun fact, this year I got diagnosed with ADHD, so I can't really comment on distractibility because I have more than most people.
Right.
So fun. Yeah.